good news from the end of last year is basically 40% of electricity in the United States is emission free.
Thing is, like everybody, nuclear is one of those things where everybody wants it, but everybody wants it somewhere else. This is good news, though.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more nuclear, but the nuclear one is more. It's less like polarized actually, and then as far as the not in my backyard versus wind, and those turbines probably don't have nothing on the outdoor cat as far as killing birds.
Cats are way more too.
Yeah.
New York Times wants all Chat GPT instances deleted.
I think they might have a pretty strong case here. If New York Times thinks they have a strong enough case, and they're like, I'm not settling this with you. I not only want the money and the damages, I also want.
Hello, how the tech are you? I am historian Matt. I'm one of the hosts and a co-producer on this show, and I got a couple of interesting stories for you today. My first story is basically good news from the end of last year is basically 40% of electricity in the United States is emission free. And that data is coming from the U.S. Energy Information Agency. The data runs through October, so it's not all the way to the end of the year, but it's most of the year. I don't know if they're going to send another one for later in the year, or if that's their like end of their fiscal year or something like that, or data year, whatever you want to call it. But basically, lots of good news in it overall, even though it's not perfect news. But for some of it is, one of it is wind and solar combined now match the output for coal power. And that's because basically wind and solar is continuing to grow and coal power is continuing to decrease in usage. Importantly, which may not sound that important, but importantly, the energy use is flat, so it's neither increasing or decreasing. And basically, why that is important is a lot of people were concerned that our total energy use is increasing while we're adding on solar and wind power and these other, emission-free sources, and that we basically weren't getting anything out of it. It was just keeping the coal power, keeping, other fossil fuel power and, energy sources while adding on wind and solar, and we're just using more of it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. This is actually like reducing our overall use of fossil fuels. The kind of bad news, kind of good news, neutral kind of, is natural gas is unfortunately the fastest growing energy source. And it increased by about 3% total of everybody. Anyways, the good news is, even though, natural gas is a fossil fuel, it is the lowest carbon emission per unit of energy of all carbon sources. So that's better. So overall, our carbon footprint for energy in the United States should be going down. And, but quickly overall, the breakdown of energy sources is 44% natural gas, 18% nuclear, 16% coal, 10% wind, 6% solar, and 6% hydro. So if the numbers that are, emissionless is adding up nuclear, wind, solar, and hydro. Nuclear is the highest number there. That's surprisingly stayed flat. It hasn't really, it might be coming down, but we'll see. But it's considered emissionless because we don't put out nuclear stuff in the air unless there's a big problem. But what do you think, Dave?
I'm not surprised to see this high number on natural gas.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than coal. It's good to see coal going down. I don't know if somebody would have asked me like what percent of electricity production was emission free, I would have probably guessed less than 40%.
Yeah, I definitely would have.
But I mean, I don't think I would have. I don't think I'd have guessed 20%. I might have just said a third. Like but I don't know now because I've been primed with the 40% number, right? So I have no idea what I would have guessed if I came in cold here.
My guess would have been I would have guessed under 20%, but I also probably would have forgotten about hydro and nuclear as emission free. Like particularly nuclear there's a lot more nuclear power in the United States than I was expecting. And I was kind of surprised, but it's still holding in there somewhat. There was actually like 2 new nuclear power plants coming. One was fully come online and this past year, 2023, and one more is not quite started, but is all ready to go and just hasn't been turned on yet. May have been turned on by the time this video gets out. I don't know.
So yeah, nuclear. The thing is, like nuclear is one of those things where everybody wants it, but everybody wants it somewhere else.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's a lot of things, that not in my backyard is not just, a lot of people just think of it as like issues that are specific to like cities or rich areas. But I mean, this is like nuclear is a really big one. And strangely enough, wind power is another one of those not in my backyard issues, which I find shocking because you haven't been in the Bay Area, you left, but I don't know if you remember, if you traveled north, there was this hill you'd go over, leaving like Livermore, I think into Tracy. You'd come over the crest of this hill and there'd be these windmills everywhere. And I just thought it looked so cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what you're talking about because they had like older windmills and newer ones, or wind turbines, I guess they're called. But they looked really cool. They're all over this hill. I guess it's some hill, some gap that had a lot of wind come through, and they put the road through. And that's probably the only reason they were allowed to do it, because pretty much the only thing there was the interstate or whatever that was going through. And it looked really cool. But also people complained about noise. And I remember, the cars were making more noise than the wind farm was. Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not gonna be without noise, but they're up pretty high off the ground. I don't know. I mean,
the other one they complain about is like, it's going to kill birds, but tall buildings kill more birds than by like orders of magnitude, more than these wind farms do. And there's ways of, saving birds. They've worked on ways of reducing the number of birds hit by these big turbines.
And those turbines probably don't have nothing on the outdoor cat as far as killing birds.
Cats are way more too.
So
as well. So I don't remember how much I think they might be the number one killer of birds.
Yeah. So I mean, I think sometimes the concern about the birds is maybe a red herring for other more not in my backyard kind of concerns. I think people think they're an eyesore. I know that we didn't intend on talking about issues around the wind turbines, but it's stunning actually, because it's so weird. Like different people just think of like the wind turbines in such different ways. I mean, if I looked out the window and saw wind turbines, I'd be like, it is the future. Yeah,
but it's also like they do like offshore wind. People complain about that, and you're like, it's literally in nobody's backyard,
right?
Like it's offshore, but they still complain. Oh, but we can see it from the coast, but not really,
And again, it just. I mean, would you want an oil rig there? I mean, you got to get the energy somewhere.
Exactly.
The hydro one is interesting. I would have, if somebody would have asked what percentage of we got from hydroelectric, I'd have been like, is it even one?
Yeah, it's quite a bit, because we went and dammed like all the rivers. The problem with hydro is we can't add any more. We've dammed all the rivers that we possibly can to produce hydropower, and even we went way overboard, and we're like taking out dams now because they're causing problems.
There's some places there, and it's really small scale and not like making a lot of electricity, but they're working on, I don't know if I guess it's hydroelectric, where the tides are pushing turbines as well, like ocean tides.
Yeah, I guess that counts as well.
Yeah, but that's not what most of this is from.
Yeah, they're always looking into that. There's that and like wave power and stuff, and we've been seeing that sort of stuff for quite a while, but nothing of scale has been built. I don't think there's been any of those kind of farms or anything.
Well, I think the ocean is just like a much more inhospitable, and like the bottom of the ocean or whatever, the ocean floor or wherever, because the stuff's going to get broken in the ocean. The thing is, like, stuff attaches to anything stable in the ocean. Barnacles.
that tends to foul up stuff very quickly.
Right. Yeah, it's the ocean is an inhospitable environment, and probably not where we're going to be getting our electricity. Yeah. This is good news though. Yeah. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more nuclear, but the nuclear one is more. It's less like polarized actually, and then as far as the not in my backyard versus wind, like even very pro-nuclear people don't want a nuclear plant 5 miles from their house.
Well, yeah, there's a small but very outspoken group of people are very anti-nuclear. There's been a growing movement to support nuclear because a lot of people realize that it's one of the best ways we're going to get out of this. If we're going to reduce our emissions overall, that's one of the best ways of doing it. I don't think that's going to really happen, but it would be nice to see more. But the problem is nuclear power plants are really expensive to build. They take a long time to build. They don't take too long to build, but most of that is paperwork. It's not the actual building part of it. And so it doesn't take much for anti-nuke people to block everything.
Right. And, not for nothing, because of the amounts of water needed, the problem, And it's like the reasonable problem actually is that, hey, you're putting this on on the ocean or a major waterway. And if there is a problem, now the problem is for, the ocean or the major waterway. Yeah. That is not an unreasonable concern. But I think that is actually, if I'm going to try to be more practical about it, that is an argument for tearing down the old plants and building new ones that are more safe.
Yeah, that is true.
But that's
and I
that's
don't
not
really want to
the,
go into that, but yeah, there's a whole issue with that, including there's a big, I guess the nuclear power plant in California, the big one, was a Diablo Canyon, is down now.
Yeah.
Shut down. That was a big issue. But
yeah, and I mean,
anyways,
that's an old plant.
Yeah, it's an old plant. The reason they shut it down, I did look this up for other reasons, but they shut it down because of it was an old plant, had old reactor design. To continue using it, they would have to upgrade it, or upgrade the safety mechanism stuff. I don't know all the details, but it was because of safety, basically, and bringing it up to code. And that would have been, I think, at least $1 billion to do. And they're like, no, we don't have the money for this.
Right. And just, I don't know how much building a new one is, but building a new one, you'd get more, I think, more bang for your buck than retrofitting an old one.
I'll tell you, it's tens of billions.
Oh, well, and maybe
yeah. That's why I said it's expensive. Like you can't just like raise money. It's basically got to be a government entity to build these things.
And I mean, actually, that's fine with me. I don't want, I don't want, I don't want a certain, there's a certain entrepreneur who I really don't want building nuclear power plants.
Yeah. Well, luckily he's more invested in solar, so he might be part of the problem.
Yeah. But I mean, that's I'm fine with it being government entities building them. The only, one of the problems actually with decommissioning an old site is you can't really. That's now like a super fund site. You're not putting condos there. Even if you've cleaned it up properly, nobody wants to use that land for anything. You put a park there, nobody go into that park. So now the land is, even if it's cleaned up and there's no, the radiation is no different than anywhere else, people are still just going to be terrified of that plot of land. And
pretty much.
To be perfectly honest, I wouldn't want a house that was built on a former nuclear power plant site. No matter, even though, you could demonstrate to me that it was safe, I would still be like, all things considered, maybe I'll get the house over there. All other things being equal. Or, I could just imagine somebody be like, oh, we'll build low income housing there. I'd be like, no. Only build mansions there, please. Because we don't want,
if something happens, they'll clean it up. They have the money to clean it up.
Right. But this is all really interesting. And I'm glad because I didn't see this. And it certainly wouldn't have come up on any of my other shows. What do you got next?
Talk about energy and stuff, so it's good. So my next topic is on another topic that we cover a lot, but some new info. But basically, New York Times wants all Chat GPT instances deleted. Okay, maybe that's a little strong, but basically that's what they want. But basically, the New York Times has filed a lawsuit against several companies related to OpenAI. So not just OpenAI, but that's including places like, companies like Microsoft, which has money, so they can go after. But anyways, the lawsuit alleges that not only is there copyright infringement, but also the people it allows people to circumvent the New York Times paywall, and it implies like hallucinated misinformation that ChatGPT comes up with all the time. That misinformation actually came from the New York Times when it really didn't. It just came out of nowhere. And there's some examples in the lawsuit, particularly for prompts. So there's some trivial prompts you can send to ChatGPT that will make it return large sections of New York Times articles. And similarly, like not only can you do that, but similar prompts, you can get it to make, hallucinate information. And there's in the linked article, they give some examples of that. But finally, the suit seeks to, the erasure of all ChatGPT instances that were trained using New York Times content, and a permanent injunction preventing them from, using New York Times content in the future. But also, of course, the New York Times wants money in terms of all sorts of damages, and the list of like all the damages is just too large to list here. But you can see it. I don't even think it's a full list in the article that I linked. So what do you think? New York Times going after Chat GPT?
I mean, if they didn't ask to use the stuff and it's, spitting out large chunks of a New York Times article, then they have a pretty, I don't know the laws around this, but common sense, whatever that means, I would think they might have a pretty strong case here.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty strong case. And the example that I saw it is like, there are a couple different ways. Like they would say just, originally you could just type in like, tell me what the New York Times article said about this. And it would actually like return the New York Times article that was inside Chat GPT. But I think they've fixed that loophole. Chat GPT has fixed it. But then they're like, well, if you type in the first like paragraph of an article from the New York Times, and I don't know exactly what else you have to put in the prompt, but basically that plus a little bit else, you can get it to print out the rest of the article. So again, there's like multiple loopholes to get at these articles. And that's what they're talking about in that part of the lawsuit. Yeah. And in some cases, it will say like, tell it to summarize an article, and it will just like make up information that's in this article from the New York Times.
So it's like a combination of like copyright fraud, not copyright fraud, but copyright infringement. And I mean, almost maybe like defamation, sort of, by claiming that misinformation that false information came from the New York Times. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
I'm not sure defamation is the exact right thing here, but it seems like that is bad for the reputation of the New York Times. If people are like, well, the New York Times said this is false. And then the New York Times never said that. Well, can't sue the chatbot itself. So I guess you got to go after the people that made the chatbot, right?
Exactly. So I don't know if they're going to be able to, or I don't know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see if there is just a settlement, and Microsoft or OpenAI maybe with Microsoft's help or something just pays off the New York Times, hopefully on an ongoing basis if they want to continue using their articles. But we'll see what happens. I suspect they're not going to just shut down Chat GPT.
Well, but I mean, if New York Times thinks they have a strong enough case and they're like, I'm not settling this with you. I not only want the money and the damages, I also want, because like settlements are sometimes sealed. They're like, I also want everything that happened here on the public record so that then we can publish articles about it that you can't use to train your next chat. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could see where if the New York Times and their attorneys are of a mind, they could just be like, we're not settling this. We would like this to play out in the public because this is a matter of public interest. Because no amount of money, honestly, is going to solve the problem. And it's not like the, whatever the settlement is it wouldn't be, I mean, it could be into the billions. That's not really going to solve the problem for the New York Times.
Well, the New York Times is like, hey, like it costs us a lot of money to pay reporters and, researchers to go out and like, get this information, write up these articles, like, and you're just basically scraping it and using it for free. That's not cool. You need to pay us for our work.
Right. And the bell's already, the bell there's already been rung. And, the option for OpenAI, I think would have to be to retrain all their models. And I think, and what guarantee would the New York Times have that the new training wouldn't use their data and just wouldn't use their information and just do everything in their power to obfuscate that they've done that?
Well, I mean, they were trying to basically obfuscate it right now, right? Because they wanted to use all this information or all these articles to train their model, but they didn't expect that you'd be able to get the original articles back out, right? And that they would just be used as information for, random prompts to put out interesting information. But clearly there's some major issues with this type of model.
Yeah. Most of this stuff does settle, but this is one where I feel like the New York Times has like all the leverage here, because
I think so.
The other thing they could do is go, hey, have you heard of our friends at the Los Angeles Times?
Yeah.
Did you know about the Washington Post?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the San Francisco Chronicle?
Yeah.
Like
the thing is, I don't know how many of these other companies there had their stuff scraped, right? They know, like specifically because of leaks from OpenAI, that New York Times was a big source of their training data. But what's interesting is we know also that Wikipedia is another big source, but I think there's some legal issues around that. Like, is most of those articles basically like Creative Commons licensed or something?
Yeah, I don't think the Wikimedia Foundation would be inclined to go after because it's volunteer, do it on donations. This is a thing that actually that something like Wikipedia was maybe not built for, because this wasn't foreseen, but I think this is a use that had someone, when they started Wikipedia, said, oh, I'm from the future and there's going to be a chatbot that's going to answer questions, and it's probably going to train on this encyclopedia. I feel like the people that did that would be like, well, that's rad.
Yeah. Yeah, probably a lot of them, because everybody who's contributing is not really looking for money.
Right. In fact, nobody contributing is looking for money, right? That's sort of the point. So I don't think that I couldn't imagine them going after. I could imagine them, being like, hey, you scraped our data. Could you, maybe publicly pressuring them to donate to the foundation, but not via legal means, right?
Right.
Not via lawsuits. But
well, the other thing I was just thinking, like, if they used Wikipedia's, articles and their Creative Commons, and I mean, they're different Creative Commons license, but it's, I'm specifically thinking of the share and share alike. Does that mean that their model is now licensed under Creative Commons share and share alike?
Oh, this all becomes real dicey real fast. And I'm telling you, if it was training on New York Times, there's no way it was not training on the LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, etc.
Yeah.
There's absolutely
I just
no
don't know
way.
if there's specific evidence of that right now.
Oh,
but
well,
it would totally make sense that they would just scrape everything.
Well, that's the thing about the discovery process, Matt.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
That is the thing about the discovery process is, if the court says, oh no, you need to provide the defense with a list of everything you used actually to train this model.
Yeah.
Well, now that's in the court record, isn't it? And I don't know, I'm not a legal expert, but I could certainly see maybe the New York Times asking for that during discovery, maybe to like stick their thumb in someone's eye in some sort of way, like, because that's how lawyers do. It's not all about the judgment in the case, because if they're trying to settle, it's about leverage when you're trying to, like, you are, and this isn't like a legal opinion or legal advice. It just stands to, anytime you're negotiating anything with anybody, you want leverage over them.
Yeah.
So this is going to be good. This is going to be real good if any of it ever sees the light of day. And I feel like a newspaper sort of has an obligation to do this in such a way where some of the details about this do see the light of day. It is different than other organizations. Not to say that the New York Times is necessarily going to do it that way, but I would be very disappointed if that wasn't one of the concerns, or one of the goals of this too, was to, you're suing this thing, but you're a journalistic entity. So through the lawsuit, if you can provide more information to the public about what's going on, you're doing your job as a journalistic outlet while you're suing them. And I think that's probably the best use for a lawsuit like this. But odds are that it'll be settled and settled, and then everybody, it'll just start getting leaked, and then nobody will really know what happened at the end.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'll keep an eye on this lawsuit and keep everybody informed.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for checking out the How the Tech Are You weekly tech news show. If you want to check out our other shows, you can do that on echoplexmedia.com. And if you want to support us, you can do that on eplex.store or patreon.com/echoplex. Don't remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below telling us what you like, what you didn't like. We want to hear what you think. Have a great tech and week.